Welcome back everyone, I'm Nick, this is SwiftUI Thinking, and in our app we have all of our coin rows of course, but when we click on one of those rows we actually want to go to a detail view where we can add some extra information about that coin. And in this video we're going to set up that segue, that navigation from the home view to that detail view. We're going to do it using a navigation link, but we're not going to do it using just a standard navigation link on each row. I'm going to explain why as we go, and we're going to kind of hack together a much more efficient way, at least for our application, to get to these detail views so that they're a little bit more efficient for our app's purposes.
All right, welcome back everyone. So I have our current app here on the right and how it is building. We have the ability to filter coins. We also have the ability to sort the list, which is really cool, honestly. And now it's time to add another screen to our app. So it's great that we have all these coins, but this is really not showing me much data. So like for Bitcoin, all I can see is the price, but I can't see all the other info that we are getting for Bitcoin. So I want to be able to click on this Bitcoin row and then go to a detail view where we can see all the information that we have for Bitcoin. So maybe a little chart, maybe some extra statistics other than just the price. So that's what we're going to start in this video. In this video, we're just going to focus on the segue between this screen and the next screen. So we're going to start with the beginner level version of this segue, and then we're going to hack together a much more efficient version that we're going to use in our app. And I'm going to explain why I'm doing this. So first, let's start by creating the detail view, which is the screen that we're going to go to. And that detail view is actually going to have its own view model. So in our core folder here, right now we have a components folder. We have a home folder, which has view models and views. And I'm going to create one more folder here. And let's call this detail. And I'm going to put it below the home folder, but inside the core, sorry. And just like our home folder, we're going to have views and view models. So in the detail view, I'm going to create a group, call it view models. And I'm going to create one more group and call it views. I think we're only going to have one view, but let's keep it organized, right? So let's put this here. So we have detail, and then in the detail section of our app, there's views and view models. And let's right click the views, create a new file. It's going to be a SwiftUI view, and let's call it detail view. Go ahead and click create. Let's click resume on the canvas just to make sure we are all connected. All right, and when we go to this detail view, obviously we are clicking on one of the rows in our app. Obviously we're going to click on one of these rows in our app, and we want to pass in the coin that we are clicking on. So here we're going to say let coin of type coin model. And let's update the preview for a second. So for the preview, we're just going to call dev.coin. Again, this is why we set up this dev class. Like, this is so efficient, so fast. And then in our body here, let's just call coin.title or name, sorry. Let's just call coin.name. Just so when we go to this view for now, we know that it is working and it's all connected and we have the right name here. All right, so let's go to this detail view now. So from our home view, I'm going to go into the home view. When we click on one of these rows, we want to segue into that detail view. So these rows are actually in the altcoins list, and we're also going to set up for the portfolio list on the second tab. But let's just worry about the altcoins list first. So in the altcoins list, we have this coin row view. And remember, we are inside a navigation view, right? When we set up the app.swift file, we put our entire app in a navigation view. So because we are in a navigation view, we can use a NavigationLink, open the parentheses, and I can use the destination and label here. The destination is going to be a detail view, and we can pass in the coin from our loop. And the label is just going to be what we have already. So it's the coin row view. So let's ignore the formatting issue that changed real quick. But if I click on one of these now, it should be a navigation view, and it should navigate me into the detail view just with our text, with our name. So it says Bitcoin and it looks like it's working. Let's go to Dogecoin, Polkadot, and it's working. And this is great, right? For a beginner level app, this is perfect. This was super easy to implement. It took us 2 seconds and it's bringing us to Ethereum and it's working exactly as we want. But before we move forward, let's go into the detail view and let's create a custom initializer here. Just for a second, let's create an init, open the brackets. Let's pass in our coin of type coin model and we'll set self.coin equal to coin. And then in here, let's just print out initializing detail view 4. And then let's do backslash open close parentheses and pass in the coin.name. All right, let's build and run our app quick. So, and we're building the simulator because then we can get these printouts. So once we load, we are actually going to get a bunch of printouts here. So because we had that default navigation link on all of these rows, that actually creates the detail view as soon as this row comes onto the screen. So for beginner level apps, this is great because the next view that we click on when we go to click on Bitcoin, this has already been created in our app. It is preloaded and it's like super fast and efficient. But as you can see here, when we were just on this first screen, the app actually ended up initializing all of these extra views. So behind the scenes of this screen right now, there's like 10 additional detail views that were created. And while we just have this like plain detail view with like nothing on it, that's fine, right? This is not taking a lot of computing power of our app. It's really not a problem. But you could imagine that if we had a ton of stuff on this view and all of that was loading and 10 of them were loading at once, that could significantly slow down our app. And especially as we start scrolling, all of these are going to be created behind the scenes. And this is just the default behavior of the navigation link. So it's great for the fact that these screens would be loaded already, but obviously it's not very efficient if we have so much going on that next screen and it ends up starting to slow down our app. So what's even worse is that if we wanted to then on the detail view in our initializer, if we wanted to maybe set up a view model and then make an additional call to the database or another API call, those inits would all be running. So then while we're scrolling, we would be making like hundreds of extra API calls, and we don't want that in our app. So ideally in the future, hopefully SwiftUI releases a lazy navigation link so that the page only loads if we do click on it. But as it is right now, we don't have that ability, and we don't like this functionality because this is creating a whole bunch of extra views. And on our detail view, we are going to actually make an API call, and we're going to have a lot of functions setting up on that view so that if we ended up doing this 100 times, it would probably start to slow down our app. So for the rest of this video, we're going to hack together basically an easy way to navigate around this issue. And I think most beginner level courses on YouTube would probably just keep this in and just roll with it because it is so easy. But I really do think this is not efficient if you're building a production app. Obviously, if it was just a simple screen, that works. But we need to make it so that only the item that we're clicked on is going to load. All right, so what we're going to do is actually take out this navigation link that we just added here. So I'm going to remove the navigation link and just go back to how we started with just the coin row view in our app. Should look back to our normal starting state here. All right, and then on this coin row view, on the entire row, we're just going to add a .onTap gesture. So if I click anywhere on this row, it's going to execute this function. And we're going to do a little bit of logic, so let's make it its own function. So down here, I'm going to put private func, let's say segue. And let's pass in the coin that we're clicking on of type coin model, and we'll open the brackets. We'll update this in a second, but on our tap gesture, let's just call segue, pass in our coin. All right, so we tap, we call segue, and then in here, we're going to add some logic to actually segue. We're going to do the same thing for the portfolio list. So if I tap on one of the coins on the second screen, it should also segue to the same detail view. So we're going to add an on tap gesture, segue, pass in the coin. Pretty simple so far. And what we're going to do at the top of our view here, we are going to set up two variables. We're going to set up a @state var. Let's say private var. We'll say selected coin of type coin model. And we're going to make it optional because we're going to start it setting equal to nil. So the first thing we do when we click on a coin, we're going to set the selected coin. And the second thing we're going to do, we're going to say @state private var. We're going to say show detail view. This will be of type bool, and we'll set it equal to false. And this show detail view is going to work much like the show portfolio view. So right now the show portfolio view is binding in our is presented for the sheet. So when show portfolio view gets toggled, the sheet gets toggled and then it shows portfolio view. And we're going to do essentially the same thing except with a navigation link. So let's go down maybe at the bottom of this Z stack and let's add a background. And on the background, we're going to add a navigation link. All right, we're going to open the parentheses and we're going to look for the completion that has destination is active and a label. Click enter. And let's leave these as is for 1 second. So what I'm doing is adding a navigation link on the background of our view. And we're adding it on the background because we don't actually need to be able to click it. Instead of clicking on this navigation link like we just had, we're just going to toggle a Boolean to determine when we want to activate it. And so in here, we're just going to actually bind it to the show detail view. Okay. The label for this, because we're not clicking in, it doesn't really matter what the label is because we don't need to see it. We don't need to click it. So in here, we're just going to add an empty view, which is basically just a clear view. And since it's in the background, we're not going to see it anyway. All right, I'm just going to put this on one line just to clean it up a little bit. And then finally, we need the destination that we want to go to. So we're going to call a detail view here. Open the parentheses, and right now it's going to ask us for a coin of type coin model. And we want to pass in this selected coin that we are going to set up when we click it. And this is a state variable and it is optional. So we can't just pass this in. We can't just pass in selected coin. We're going to get an error. All right, so we need to actually bind the detail view to the selected coin. So if the selected coin changes, our detail view is then notified that it needs to change. So go into the detail view. Let's change this let coin to @binding var will be coin of type coin model. And then we actually need to update this initializer to actually update this as binding. So here we're going to say self._coin. That refers to the binding of it. And we cannot assign value of type coin model to binding coin model. So this binding coin model is the type that we need to pass in here. All right, and then we just need to get the wrapped value from this coin. So here, instead of just calling coin.name, let's just print out coin.wrappedvalue.name. And our preview is we're throwing an error, so let's actually just make this .constant and pass in our dev.coin. And now let's take this detail view. So let's go back and we're going to recall detail view. This time it's looking for a binding coin model. So we'll pass in money sign, selected coin. And actually one thing we messed up, the selected coin is actually a optional coin model. So in our detail view, we need to make this an optional coin model. And then here we will also unwrap there. Finally, we'll just fix this quick, coin.name, otherwise blank string. And the last thing we need to do is go back into our home view. And when we call this segue function, all we need to do is set the selected coin equal to the coin. And after that, we will call show detail view, and we'll set it equal to true. Or we could just call it toggle, actually. It's probably a little more efficient. So now we should be able to click on a coin and it should segue. I'm going to run this to a simulator quick. And we still have, in our detail view, we still have this printout for initializing detail view. And we should see it come through a couple times here. And it's coming through, you'll notice, it comes through as nil. It came through a couple times just because the screen was like loading and it was kind of like a timing thing with all of our publishers and subscribers. But you will notice that it said nil each of these times, and it didn't say Bitcoin, Ethereum, and that's because we set the value of the selected coin equal to nil at first. And as I scroll around this app, you'll notice that we're not getting all those printouts. We're not creating like 100 different views behind the scene here. So our app by itself running right now is definitely much more efficient because it's not creating all those excess screens behind the scenes. And now if I click on Bitcoin, we'll see that at that time, as soon as I clicked it, it initialized the detail view for Bitcoin, and we can see it here. And this should be working as I click on different buttons. We're going to the Dogecoin. It says Dogecoin, and this is already so much more efficient because you'll see we're only initializing it when we actually need it, right? We're not going to initialize them beforehand when we are just in the default view, and we're only initializing the ones that we need. So you can imagine just off the bat how much more efficient this is going to make your apps, because creating those hundreds of screens behind the scenes, you probably didn't even know it was happening, but that definitely can start to slow down your app, and it can cause you to make a lot of like extra API calls and a lot of extra rendering that's just really not needed. So hopefully in the future, Apple comes up with just a lazy navigation link that we can use. But until then, this is probably one of the better solutions for navigating and hacking around that issue. There are a couple more advanced ways that we can do this using generics and some other value types, but I haven't covered those yet, so I didn't want to start introducing you guys to anything too complex here. So I think this is a fairly simple hack around. All we did was really create two state variables and then just one simple navigation link in the background that is activated when we update those two variables. All right, the last thing we're going to do in this video is on the detail view. So when we create all the logic for our detail view, and there's going to be a lot of logic for each of these coins, we need to make sure that we actually have a coin here, because if we don't have a coin, it's just going to be a blank screen, and that's never really going to happen because we're always clicking on a coin. But the coin is optional right now technically because of this hack. So what we would actually do is create a Z-stack, and then very simply would say if let coin equals coin, open the brackets. So if we can get the coin out of here, we can then add our text on the screen. And this coin is no longer optional, so we can just call coin.name and it should work. But in reality, when this coin gets added, at the time that we create this text, this is really the time that we want to create the detail view. So when we are just binding to that blank coin model and it's empty, we don't really want to create our detail view with all of the extra data and initializers that we're setting up, because our real detail view is going to have a view model, it's going to make an API call, and we don't need all of that excess until we actually have a coin selected. So what we're going to do is create a struct called detail loading view. It's going to conform to view, and we're going to open the brackets. And this is basically going to be the same thing that we have right now. So we're going to pass in a binding coin, and we don't even need our custom initialize here because it's not really doing anything. And we're going to copy the body and we're going to paste it here. And then what we're going to do instead is when we do get the coin, we're going to actually initialize here. We're going to initialize an actual detail view. And this is a actual coin. It's not a binding. So in our detail view, we're going to switch this back. We're going to say let coin of type coin model. And this will just be a regular coin model. We'll set self.coin equals coin. We'll put this back to coin.name. We can then get rid of the body here. We're going to set up this body in a future video. But in our loading detail view, we'll then just set up our detail view. And we'll pass in our coin. this detail view is going to be back to just a regular coin. We don't need to bind anything to this detail view. So now we have our regular detail view code back as we started this video, but we have this loading view in between the two to deal with like that binding issue for our hack. So now all we need to do is jump back into our home view, and instead of loading a detail view first, we're just going to load a detail loading view, bind with our selected coin. Let's build it one final time for this video to the simulator. And we are now seeing that nothing is printing out to the console just yet. And this detail view still has our print statement for initializing detail view, because right now behind the scenes, we've only initialized this loading view, but it hasn't had an actual coin yet. So since there is no coin, we haven't actually passed this check and we haven't created a detail view. But as soon as I click on one, we can get that printout, loading detail view for Ethereum. And you guys can see, I don't really need to explain this. This is so much more efficient. And one thing you guys probably noticed that I just realized I've been doing is I've been clicking on the actual text here and on the coin. I haven't been clicking in the center of the list here. And that's because it's just a habit, but because we can't actually click on the center of this because we have a tap gesture on this row, but right in the center of our row is actually a spacer and we can't click on it. So that's kind of not a good user experience, and we need to fix that quickly. So I'm going to go to the detail row. What is that called? The coin row view. And in our coin row view, we have a very simple view with a left column, center column, right column, and on the background of the entire view, we're going to add a color. So we're going to say color.theme.background. And because we're adding a color, it would actually make the whole view clickable because we're clicking on a color rather than just like empty space in our app now. So let's actually make this color.theme.green for a second. Let's build and run just to make sure that it works. All right, so now I can actually click on any of these and it should work. And the last thing we're going to do is just, instead of making it green, obviously, we're going to use the background and we're going to give it an opacity of 0.001. So basically like the lowest opacity, so it's basically clear, but it is still there. And since it is still there, it should be clickable. So one more time, let's build and run. We can't actually visibly see any backgrounds, but we can click on the rows and get to that next screen. All right, guys, a little bit of hacking we did in this video, but I think this is pretty good stuff to know and is pretty important because a lot of your apps are going to use navigation links, and you definitely want to be careful on how many of those secondary detail views are being created in your app that you don't know about. All right, hope you enjoyed this video. Leave a comment below if you learned something, and as always, I'm Nick. This is Swiftful Thinking, and I'll see you in the next video.